Why do I feel like we're weighing in for a boxing match? Well,
Cage fight?
yeah, cage fight. No, no cage here. So this is really a pleasure for me. I'm Dan Poneman, as you just heard, and it's my honor and privilege to introduce a great leader, and I can say a valued colleague and friend, John Wagner. John is the director of the Idaho National Laboratory. For those of you who do not know, the national laboratories are the crown jewel of American science. We have 17 of them, but the one that is dedicated most to civil nuclear is the Idaho National Laboratory. John has a bit over $2 billion of budget and a few employees, over 6,000. And we're going to kick this thing off because not only is Idaho the sort of belle of the ball in terms of civil nuclear, but we had a big week. Idaho National Laboratory is the cradle of new reactors. And those of you who were here yesterday heard Secretary Wright make an announcement about the first criticality by a private U.S. company in over 4 decades. John, what's happening out there? Tell us about it.
Uh, uh, it's my pleasure to, and thanks to Atlanta Council for having me, and Dan. It's great to be here with you. It is really exciting times and really rewarding. I do want to say we're just at the beginning, but I do also want to put things in context, if I may. So throughout my entire career, we have been shutting down perfectly good nuclear power plants in this country for a variety of reasons. I'm happy to get into those. And have just not seen things come together the way that they're coming together now. Maybe we can get into that further. But at Idaho National Laboratory, we are the Department of Energy laboratory. We do a lot of different things like many national laboratories, but our primary mission space is nuclear. Quite frankly, that's why I'm in Idaho. I'm a nuclear engineer. But 52 different reactors have been designed, built, and operated on the site, but almost all of them were in the 60s, at the 50s and the 60s, a couple in the early 70s. So as you noted, it has been more than 40 years since a privately funded advanced reactor went critical. It's been more than 50 years since a new advanced reactor, a new novel reactor achieved criticality on our site. And so it's really exciting that we broke through that again. But again, I want to emphasize this is just the beginning. There are multiple other companies that we are working with, and some even, I mean, we're working with most of them, some even that we're not, that are racing towards demonstrating their systems, demonstrating the commercial viability of their systems on their pathway to commercial deployment. Our president set a goal last May through an executive order of achieving 3 new criticalities by July 4th of this year. Many people believed that was impossible. I've publicly said I was skeptical. We've got one down and a really good shot at achieving at least 3 by July 4th. So it's really exciting times.
I will confess too, when I read the executive orders, I was skeptical. We are not used to in the nuclear industry moving at what one might call Manhattan Project speed, but I think we have. But listen, to unpack this a bit, because those of us who are cognoscenti are familiar with the terminology, and I'm going to make a shameless plug. The phrase criticality, as in my book, Going Critical, still available on Amazon.com. Thank you, thank you. Sorry,
Well done.
royalties forthcoming. Um, Explain to us, and there's an audience globally here. What does this mean? What does it mean to go critical, and why is that a particularly significant threshold for the deployment of advanced nuclear?
Yeah, so we get this. I'm answering this question a lot lately, so hopefully I've got this actually pretty practiced, and not that I needed to, but a lot of people there's just not knowledge. It's not misunderstanding. It's just they don't know. What does it mean? Does this mean we're putting power on the grid? No. Okay. Is this a bad thing? No. So achieving criticality in the nuclear world, all that simply means is that you have a system. It's a configuration of nuclear materials and other materials in which for each fission reaction, I don't want to get too far down here, but each fission reaction generates 2.5 neutrons when the atom fissions. If one of those neutrons causes another fission, and on average 1.5 you lose, And then from that fission, one of those neutrons causes another fission. That's a self-sustaining chain reaction. That's a stable system that can generate power. So going critical means that we worked with this private company. Antares is the company that achieved criticality with us last Thursday. They configured their fuel in the reactor system in a way to demonstrate that it will achieve criticality, a sustained nuclear reaction. And this is a very, very key milestone on a development pathway of that technology to show that it's viable to go to the next stage, which would be power ascension, power operations, a variety of additional testing. And then from there, you would then proceed to power generation, meaning electricity or heat extraction and utilization.
Okay, John, so I want to dig in just a little bit further here because going back to the USS Nautilus, right, we had under President Eisenhower's leadership and the execution of the legendary Admiral Rickover, the deployment of nuclear power first on boats, on submarines, and then on carriers using the light water technology that is customary. And when they had some extra reactors, they gave them to Duquesne Light Company, and we had shipping port, and the whole commercial fleet in the United States now 94 reactors, also light water reactors. So help us understand because now we have this new wave. You've talked about Antares. We have so-called fourth generation technology. They don't use light water coolants. They don't use low enriched uranium fuel. They use either a liquid metal like sodium or could be lead, or they use molten salt or high temperature gas to go. Why? We already have a reactor design, and we'll come back to that. But just help us understand what is the buzz, what is the rationale for these advanced reactors? Are there intrinsic advantages to this fourth generation? Why are people looking at them and why are they so enthusiastic about them? And why do they come in small packages?
There's a lot of questions there, Dan. So let me start with reinforcing what you said about our current fleet of plants. They are light water reactor technologies, meaning the coolant is water. They date themselves back to the early development in the Navy. We have 94 operating reactors in the United States today. That provides about 20% of our electricity, and they just quietly do their job and provide power for one out of every five light bulbs, so to speak. They're proven technologies. We talk a lot about safety. People think a lot about safety in the nuclear realm. They are among the absolute safest technologies to generate energy from. If you don't believe me, go look at our world and data, and they're statistically indistinguishable from wind and solar, for example. So why change? So a couple of things are driving the change. And one other piece of context, when people talk about Gen 4 reactors, advanced reactor technologies, you hear SMRs, you hear a lot of this terminology. Actually, let me take a moment to just say something about terminology. Small modular reactors are being used to sort of as a terminology for all nuclear reactors. What I don't, if you take away terminology, I want you to think about our current reactors on the order of 1,000 megawatts each. Those are large reactors. I'd call those large gigawatt scale reactors. Small modular reactors are actually on the order of a couple hundred megawatts in that range. Micro reactors, which I want to get to, are on the order of a few megawatts up to maybe 20 megawatts. Particularly when you think about microreactors, when I talk about microreactors, I think about reactors that can be completely built in a factory and then deployed and sort of just plugged in. So think about a Connex container type reactor. All that's to put in perspective that why advanced reactors, there are different market needs. Light water reactors have been developed for, at least in the United States, but it's pretty transferable globally, for grid scale electricity. We still have substantial demands for grid scale electricity. But 1 gigawatt at a time is a very large commitment for any utility or even a grid to take on. That led to development of small modular reactors, again, few hundred megawatt reactors. More modular construction, not completely built in a factory, but relying more and more on factory components and more on assembly at site. And so that's a strong focus both in the United States and elsewhere. Also within that category, there are other reactors that offer interesting advantages. I'll highlight TerraPower's Natrium reactor. paired with molten salt energy storage, pairs very well to address grid fluctuations and load following, so to speak. X Energy has a partnership with Dow Chemicals because actually, I didn't hear the secretary's remarks this time, but he talks a lot about how much of our energy needs is not electricity, it's heat. Process heat for industrial applications. And so that's why Dow Chemicals has teamed up with them. That's a high temperature reactor, high temperature gas reactor. But really, when you think about it, it's like, what is the applications? Then with this high assay LEU, with these advanced reactors, what that gives you is more juice, so to speak, in a smaller environment, opening up the opportunities for even smaller reactors to have really significant opportunities to provide heat that otherwise wasn't possible in a big configuration, a big water configuration. Antares reactor that just went critical is a graphite moderated heat pipe, triso fueled. I know there's a lot of stuff there, but it's the part of the advanced technologies that enable it to be very small and to serve different applications.
One of the things you've mentioned fuel a couple times, John, and one of the things that was spoken about in the executive orders where Idaho again has unique expertise is not just the enrichment side of the fuel cycle, but the whole what we call the back end. In other words, plutonium-based fuels. Tell us about that aspect of the executive orders and Idaho's role in drilling down on that. When I was deputy secretary, we started the pyroprocessing study that you all were doing at Idaho National Laboratory. Help this audience understand that a bit better.
So happy to. And let me just, I'm sure not everybody is familiar with the executive orders as we are. So there were four. One was to reinvigorate testing in the national laboratories. There's three by July 4th as part of that. One was related to reforming the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. One was related to reinvigorating the industrial base. It's where we get into some of the recycling stuff. And one was related to advancing nuclear for national security applications. Very comprehensive set. Coming back to your question about recycling, many don't realize we actually invented recycling in this country. We actually moved forward with some commercial recycling in West Valley. And then we decided as a country that we weren't going to do that. And we changed our policy, and our policy was to not recycle commercial spent fuel. And I'll come back to that. By the way, I need to trade my vocabulary. We're now calling it used nuclear fuel because to indicate the value that's inherent in that material. But we decided not to. We decided we would just use the fuel and then dispose of the fuel. That has all been revisited, and policy is changing to promote the reuse of the valuable material, both uranium and other isotopes, plutonium you mentioned, and other isotopes that are in that material. You might say, wow, that's a big policy shift, and it is. I will say at Idaho National Laboratory, we've been recycling used nuclear fuel since well before I was born. And we do it today. What we do today is we recycle high enriched uranium out of used nuclear fuel from DOE-owned reactors. We downblend that material to the so-called high assay low enriched uranium, which just basically means below 20 weight percent U-235 enrichment, and are making that material available for advanced reactor demonstrations. So what was waste is literally now being turned into a valuable commodity.
Fascinating. Always when I talk to you, I have more questions than time, and we're already running a bit short. So I want to get to some of the other things you mentioned. You said we still get 20% of our energy from our traditional light water reactor fleet. Been a lot of focus on sustaining that fleet. They've had life extensions. They may be adding up to a century by now. What role does Idaho National Laboratory have in sustaining the existing fleet that is still so prodigious a source of carbon-free power for our country?
Yeah, so we have a significant role, but you know who has the most significant role? The utilities. So a shout out to utilities for how they're operating their reactors, the capacity factors. Nuclear has the highest availability of power of any energy source. Our fleet in the United States has been running for the last several years at 92% and plus capacity, which is incredible, and it's a testament to how they're operating the reactors. From a research and development side of this equation, what we've had is through the Department of Energy's Office of Nuclear Energy, we have something called the Light Water Reactor Sustainability Program. And I want to note that that program has transitioned significantly in recent years. Early years were focused on material degradation, material aging, questions around the extension of these reactors from their originally licensed period, which was 40 years, to 60 years. We called that license extension. Now we talk about subsequent license extension, taking it from 60 to 80 years. So what are the materials issues in our knowledge base to ensure that that's a safe thing to do? It's transitioned probably about 5, 6 years ago to be more a focus on operational costs.
Hmm.
All right. So once we understood those issues of material degradation and had the technical basis for extending them, how do we extend them from an economic standpoint, modernization, obsolescence of equipment that they were originally built for, inefficiencies in their operations, new fuels so we can run them longer between refueling. There's a whole plethora of research that we support with partners in that area.
Okay, so you mentioned partners. One of the things I think is great about what's happening now is it's not just localized. There are places like East Tennessee, like Idaho, like Hanford Reservation, very well established. But I know Idaho has also had a role in trying to bring nuclear to other parts of the country. I'm a Buckeye. I'm very happy what's happening in southern Ohio now and Piketon and so forth. Tell us about what's happening in the rest of the country and what role does Idaho play in kind of assisting other communities in getting involved in something. If we're going to triple or quadruple our nuclear energy, it's going to have to be done on a countrywide basis.
For sure. And let me start with Idaho and move out from Idaho. So we're super excited because not just the reactor criticality last Thursday, but the ones that will follow. We expect in Idaho to have more than 5 new critical systems by the end of this calendar year, several within the next month or two. But it can't all just happen in Idaho. We need nuclear power across the country, across the globe. So it's great to see states like Wyoming with the TerraPower project in Kimmer, Wyoming, where the what Pacific Corp is doing with TerraPower is currently it's a coal generation site. It's been converted some part to gas and then ultimately to nuclear. Down in Utah, our neighbors to the south, Governor Cox has an Operation Gigawatt to double that state's electricity by 2030, and they have multiple nuclear related projects that are in the works going forward. States like you mentioned, Tennessee and Texas, are leaning in heavily for new nuclear. There's a lot happening all around the country, which gives me a much higher level of confidence that this is all going to actually happen. It's, when you think about is something going to happen, is it dependent on one thing or two things? We have a lot of diversity in companies, in interests, in states involved, and utilities involved to make this happen.
One of the executive orders we keep referring to talks about restoring American leadership on a global stage. So you've talked about what happens in the country. How should people think about Idaho National Laboratory and your cooperation with foreign partners, for example?
So I think the first one-liner I would like you to think is we're here to help. As a laboratory, on behalf of the Department of Energy, we don't have anything to sell. What we do a lot of is to help companies, help states, help countries understand the technology landscape. It can be kind of overwhelming. Okay, sodium cool fast reactor, what the heck does that mean? Gas cool reactor, what do all these things mean? What are they going to cost? What about the spent fuel? What about all these different things? We can help different entities understand those types of questions. Again, we're not going to be biased towards one or the other. We're going to be, I would intend, a factual, credible source of information to help companies. The Department of Energy routinely, Alicia Duncan leads that for the Office of Nuclear Energy, routinely asks us to just help people understand and see what these systems look like. My communications people don't love this, but I'd say I'll invite you all to come visit Idaho National Laboratory so that you can actually see what these facilities look like, see what spent fuel actually looks like. It's not green goo, and have questions answered by the experts that are working on it today.
I encourage all of our international partners to take John up on that's an outstanding offer. I just got back from Africa. They are really excited about working with Americans. I think that would be great. We are out of time, but I'm going to end with a question on everybody's mind, which is what is there going on at Idaho National Laboratory that may not be widely known that we all should know about and help us understand why we should continue to be excited about the great work you're doing at Idaho.
So we've focused our conversations on nuclear. So I'm going to go off of nuclear. The work that we do for critical infrastructure security, control system cybersecurity is so important, and we should all care a lot about that. And then the fun fact, theoretically, I'm not going to say practically, theoretically, under our 890 square mile site in southeast Idaho, there are gigawatts of potential geothermal energy. So I'll leave with that one.
That's a good surprise. Please join me in thanking John, not only for today, but for all he's doing for our country. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.